All right, so today we are diving deep into Watergate.
Ooh, Watergate.
Yeah, with a
Great topic.
partially redacted FBI memo from 1974
Go ahead.
titled Watergate Investigation OPE Analysis.
I see.
And this gives us a really interesting look
Yeah.
at how the FBI's internal watchdog,
Right.
the Office of Professional Responsibility,
Uh-huh.
saw their own investigation into Watergate in the middle of all this public criticism.
So they're looking back and kind of saying, like, how did we do?
Exactly.
Okay, interesting.
And they were getting a lot of heat.
Yeah, maybe
Getting like a lot of criticism.
Yeah.
So they're trying to figure out how to respond.
And this memo that we're looking at,
Yeah.
this is their response, basically.
It is their defense.
Okay.
So let's kind of set the stage here.
Yeah.
It's 1974.
Mm-hmm.
The Watergate hearings are happening.
Front page news.
Absolutely. Everyone's watching.
Everybody.
The FBI's under fire.
Yeah.
So what do? They
Yeah.
have the OPE
Okay.
analyze everything,
Oh, wow.
every single criticism they can find.
Interesting.
White House transcripts,
Mhm.
Senate hearings,
Jeez.
newspaper articles,
They really looked at everything.
internal FBI files.
Wow.
I mean, they really did their homework.
That's impressive.
It's incredible. And from this mountain of information,
Yeah.
they come up with 15 major points of criticism.
15.
15, yeah, that they're going to respond to in this memo.
That's a lot.
And these criticisms,
Mhm.
they range from the FBI's relationship with John Dean,
Who's that?
Nixon's White House counsel,
Okay.
to whispers of a CIA cover-up,
Ooh.
to allegations of obstruction from high up.
Like the top.
Yeah, the top White House officials.
Wow. Okay.
So it's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But one of the things that I found really interesting about this memo is the tone.
Okay, what do you mean?
It's really meticulously crafted.
Mm-hmm.
So they lay out every single criticism very carefully,
Okay.
and then they present the FBI's defense in like this,
Yeah.
almost legal, like
Yeah.
kind of detail.
Footnotes and everything.
Or not quite footnotes, but yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get you.
It makes you wonder if they were really confident in their actions or just good at spinning a narrative.
I mean, that's a great question. Like, how much of this is just spin?
Exactly.
And how much of it is actually them thinking they did the right thing?
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
That is the question that hangs over this entire memo.
Right.
Were they victims of circumstance, or did their actions intentionally or not actually hinder the investigation?
Right. Were they outmaneuvered by this, like,
Yeah.
sophisticated cover-up?
Totally.
Or did they actually make things worse by how they handled things?
And we're going to try and answer that today.
I like it. Let's do it.
Let's get into it.
Okay.
One of the most controversial parts of this whole thing
Hmm.
is John Dean's involvement.
Okay.
Critics were furious that Dean...
Remind me who he is again.
Yeah, he was Nixon's White House counsel.
Okay.
They were furious that Dean was allowed to sit in on FBI interviews of other White House personnel.
So he's, like, in the room
Yeah.
while they're questioning?
Yeah, and not only that.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah, he got copies of the FBI reports.
Seriously?
Yeah, like talk about a conflict of interest.
That's a huge conflict of
That's
interest.
unbelievable.
Wow.
And what's really crazy is that even the memo
Yeah.
admits that this was a major blunder.
They say that.
Yeah, they call it probably the most serious blunder from an investigative standpoint.
They admit that.
They admit it.
Wow.
So, I mean, to me, that's a pretty shocking admission.
Yeah. It really is.
Right. It makes you question then acting FBI Director L. Patrick Gray's judgment.
Yeah, why would he let Dean be so involved?
Exactly.
Like, why would you give him that much access?
Yeah, why would you give someone who is potentially implicated in the cover-up
Right.
unfettered access
Doesn't make any sense.
to the investigation?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
You'd think they would try to keep him away from it.
You would think.
At least keep him at arm's length.
Yeah.
So what do they say about that?
So the memo kind of tries to explain this
Yeah.
by saying that agents on the ground
Mm-hmm.
felt like they couldn't really challenge Gray's decisions.
So they're saying their hands were tied.
Yeah, even if they thought Dean was manipulating the investigation.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they're basically saying, we knew it was wrong,
Right.
but we couldn't do anything about it.
But we couldn't do anything about it.
That's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, so it paints this picture of an FBI who's caught between
Yeah.
doing their duty.
To investigate.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
this pressure
Oh, yeah.
from the very people
The people they're investigating.
they're supposed to be investigating.
That's got to be difficult.
It's incredible.
So much pressure.
Yeah. And speaking of pressure,
Okay.
Let's talk about the FBI's dealings with the committee to re-elect the president.
The CRP.
Yes, the CRP.
All right.
The memo, it's almost like dripping with frustration
Really?
over how the CRP just stonewalled.
You just stonewalled them?
Totally.
Right.
Like every step of the way.
So what were they doing?
So like delays in getting records,
Uh-huh.
claims that key documents were destroyed.
Oh, wow.
CRP attorneys were allowed to sit in on interviews.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, it's just unbelievable.
So they were making it really hard to investigate.
Incredibly hard.
Wow.
And get this. The memo says that multiple high-ranking figures at the CRP, like John Mitchell,
Mhm.
Jeb Magruder,
Mm.
Maurice Stans,
Okay.
they obviously lied to the FBI.
They say obvious.
Obviously lied.
Wow.
Like straight up.
They just came out and said that.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So what was the FBI's response to that?
So they try to defend their approach
Okay.
by saying that they focused on individuals and leads
Okay.
rather than just,
Interviewing everyone.
interviewing everyone at the CRP.
Right.
Like a shotgun approach.
Yeah.
They didn't want to do that.
Okay, I see their logic there.
Yeah, and I can see the logic there.
But you got to think that they must have been frustrated.
Oh, they were so frustrated.
Right.
Like reading between the lines, you can see
Yeah, you can just tell,
that they just felt like they were
like, constantly being outmaneuvered.
outmaneuvered. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes you think like,
Were they being naive, or
Right.
was the cover-up just that good?
exactly. Was the cover-up so good that they were just,
They couldn't get past it.
yeah, they couldn't break through?
It's a good question.
And that is a question that I think we will be revisiting
Okay,
as we go deeper into this memo.
I'm ready.
But for now,
Yeah.
let's turn our attention to another fascinating part of this whole story.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Howard Hunt's White House office.
Oh, this is where it gets juicy.
This is where it gets good.
Okay.
So apparently the FBI,
Mm-hmm.
they only learn about this office.
They didn't even know about it.
No, they did not know about it.
Wow.
During an interview with Charles Colson.
Oh, I see.
He was a White House special counsel.
Okay,
And you want to know what happened next?
tell me.
Dean.
The same Dean.
The same John Dean.
Wow.
He steps in
Oh, no.
and blocks the FBI from examining the office.
You just blocked them.
Yeah, he claims that the White House would hand over Hunt's belongings themselves.
Oh, so convenient.
So convenient.
Right, like, we'll take care of it.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, you guys just stay over there.
We got this.
We'll got this.
Don't worry about it.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
It's wild, right?
So what does the memo say about that?
So the memo tries to explain the FBI's reluctance
Okay.
to get a search warrant.
Yeah, why didn't they just get a warrant?
They cite uncertainty about probable cause.
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty, like,
They weren't sure if they had enough
Yeah.
to get a warrant?
but you have to wonder if this was just a way for the White House to control
Oh, see.
what evidence the FBI saw.
Control the narrative.
Yes.
Yeah.
And speaking of control,
Yeah.
those boxes of material.
Oh, yeah, the ones they handed over.
Yeah, that Dean eventually handed over.
Uh-huh.
Those became a huge issue later,
Why?
especially after Gray admitted to destroying some of the contents.
You've destroyed evidence.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's incredibly suspicious.
Yeah, what was in those files?
Right, like what was in there?
And why did he have to destroy them?
Yeah, like was he trying to protect the White House or himself?
Or both?
Maybe both.
This is getting really interesting.
This is just the beginning.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah.
I can't wait.
We are just scratching the surface here.
Okay.
There's so much more to uncover
All right, let's take a break,
in this memo.
and we'll come back
Yes, we will be back
and get into it.
to dive even deeper
I'm ready.
into the FBI's defense
All right.
and all the shocking details
I know, shocking detail.
buried within this memo.
Can't wait.
So we were just talking about Hunt's White House office and those boxes of files.
Yeah, like what was Gray thinking destroying those?
Right. It's so suspicious.
And it makes you wonder if the FBI was a little too willing to let the White House control things.
Yeah, like tiptoeing around them almost.
Exactly. And that kind of hesitancy comes up again when you look at the criticism that the FBI didn't fully investigate every possible lead.
Like those money trails and suspicious checks.
Right. The memo really pushes back on that point, though.
Oh, yeah. They insist that they did their due diligence.
Thousands of interviews.
Yeah, and they followed all the credible leads.
All of them.
But here's something I found really interesting.
Okay.
The memo actually reveals that they tried to offer immunity
To who?
to one of the Watergate burglars,
No way.
Virgilio Gonzalez,
I've never heard that before.
in exchange for his cooperation.
Wow. What happened?
Well, the memo doesn't give us a ton of detail.
Okay.
It just says that it didn't work out.
Huh. I wonder what he knew.
Right? Like, imagine if they had flipped one of the burglars early on.
That could have changed everything.
Right? Could that have blown the whole thing wide open?
Or was the conspiracy so tight that even a cooperating witness wouldn't have made a difference?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and the memo seems to lean towards the latter.
Like it was just too well coordinated?
Right, they're basically saying the cover-up was so good, it's no wonder we had trouble.
Okay, so maybe they're giving themselves a little bit of a break there.
A little bit.
But what about the fact that they didn't even get search warrants for the homes and offices of the 5 Watergate burglars?
That does seem like a pretty basic step.
Right.
Like 101.
Exactly.
So what do they say about that?
Their response is almost comical.
Really?
They basically say that all the critics just don't understand probable cause.
Oh, so they're saying they didn't have enough evidence?
Yeah, they say the assistant U.S. attorney, Earl Silbert, told them they didn't have enough to get a warrant.
But didn't they get warrants for other stuff?
Yeah, that's the weird part. They point to the warrants they got for the burglars' hotel rooms and a rented car.
So they're trying to have it both ways.
Right, it feels a little inconsistent.
At least.
Maybe trying to control the narrative a bit.
Yeah, and that brings us to another interesting detail.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
The address books and notebooks they took from the burglars.
Ah, the famous address books.
There was a lot of criticism that they didn't interview everyone listed in those books.
Yeah, people were saying those could have led to some serious leads.
Exactly, and the whole chain of custody for those books was a mess.
Oh, yeah, they were going back and forth between the Metropolitan Police and the FBI.
It's amazing they didn't just get lost.
Right. You have to wonder if that confusion played a role in the lack of follow-up.
Possibly.
So what does the memo say?
They admit that not every name was investigated.
Of course.
But they say they focused on the names that seemed directly connected to the Watergate break-in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But get this.
Wow.
Agents in Miami actually recommended they interview everyone in the address books.
When was this?
January 1973.
So pretty early on.
Yeah, but Gray rejected the idea.
Why?
He was worried about the media attention it would generate during the burglars' trial.
So again, it's that concern about controlling the narrative.
Exactly. They didn't want any bad press.
It makes you wonder if they were more worried about protecting the White House than finding out what really happened.
Yeah, it's a valid question.
Okay, let's move on to another controversial part of this investigation.
Hit me with it.
The bug they found in Spencer Oliver's phone at the DNC headquarters.
Oh, yeah. This is a weird one.
The memo reveals that they eventually found it.
Yeah.
But there's conflicting information about when it was planted.
Really?
Yeah, McCord said he put it there before the break-in, but others said it was planted later.
So who knows?
No one knows for sure.
Classic Watergate.
Exactly, and to make things even weirder.
Okay.
The memo describes a big disagreement between the FBI and the Attorney General about sweeping the DNC headquarters for more bugs.
Oh, wow. What happened?
The Attorney General was worried about the political fallout,
Makes sense.
but the FBI decided to go ahead with it.
Did they find anything?
Nope.
Oh, that's good at least.
Yeah, but the whole thing just shows how high the stakes were.
Right. Everyone was walking on eggshells.
Totally.
So much pressure.
Okay, let's talk about the FBI's handling of Donald Segretti.
Who's he?
He was involved with the CRP,
Okay.
and he was doing some pretty shady stuff.
Like what?
Dirty tricks, trying to sabotage the Democrats.
Oh, so election law violations.
Potentially, yeah.
So did the FBI investigate him?
Well, at first they didn't really want to pursue it.
Why not?
They said they were following Department of Justice policy
Which was?
to prioritize clear-cut criminal activity over potential election law violations.
I see. So they wanted to focus on the break-in itself.
Exactly.
Okay, but they did eventually investigate Segretti, right?
Yeah. In October 1972.
What changed?
Media attention.
Ah, so once it became public, they had to do something.
Exactly. They couldn't ignore it anymore.
It seems like a lot of their decisions were driven by public perception.
It does seem that way.
Okay, so what about L. Patrick Gray,
Ah, yes. The man in charge.
the acting FBI director?
The memo really tiptoes around his actions.
Yeah, his relationship with Dean and how he handled information was definitely under scrutiny.
It says that it's a difficult area to address.
Which means...
It means they know he messed up,
Probably.
but they're trying to defend him as best they can.
Saying he was under a lot of pressure from the White House.
Right, and that he was in uncharted territory.
Okay, but they do admit that some of his decisions could be seen as hindering the investigation.
Like delaying interviews and destroying evidence.
So they're throwing him under the bus a little bit,
Just a little.
trying to shift the blame to the White House.
Exactly. They're saying, hey, look, we were just trying to do our jobs.
But those guys over there were really the ones obstructing justice.
Okay, so let's talk about those White House officials.
The big bad wolves?
The memo doesn't hold back when it comes to them. They straight up say there's absolutely no question that some of them obstructed justice.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
It is.
So who are they talking about specifically?
They name names.
Give me names.
Dean.
Haldeman.
Mm-hmm.
Ehrlichman.
Right.
Colson.
God, wow. The big guns.
They even say that Special Prosecutor Jaworski said that high-level perjury was key to the cover-up.
And who was doing the perjuring?
Mitchell and Ehrlichman.
Wow. They're not messing around.
Nope, this is a full-on indictment of the Nixon administration.
It really highlights the challenges the FBI face.
Right, trying to investigate people who are actively trying to deceive you and obstruct justice.
That's got to be tough.
Yeah, it makes you appreciate the agents who kept pushing forward.
Absolutely.
Despite all the pressure and roadblocks.
It makes you wonder how much more they could have found if they hadn't faced so much opposition.
That's a great question.
Yeah, one for the history books.
But this memo definitely gives us a unique look into the FBI during this crazy time.
Definitely a fascinating read. It shows their struggles, their justifications, and their determination to get to the truth.
However flawed that might have been.
Exactly. And we'll be back after a short break to discuss the memo's conclusions.
And what it all means.
Yes, and what it means for our understanding of Watergate. Okay, so we've seen how the FBI tried to defend themselves in this memo.
Yeah, highlighting all the work they did, all the interviews, all the leads they followed.
But we've also seen how things were kind of messed up by some of their own decisions.
Right. And of course, the big one, the obstruction from the White House.
Exactly. And as we get to the end of this memo, it's clear that the FBI is trying to walk this
fine line,
really fine line between acknowledging the challenges and saying that they did their best to uncover the truth.
Despite everything.
Despite everything.
They're trying to have it both ways.
Yeah, and it almost feels like they're trying to convince themselves as much as the public.
Right. Like, look, we did good.
Yeah, they keep bringing up the scale of the investigation.
Yeah. Thousands of interviews, tons of leads.
Like, they really want us to know how much work they put in.
But they also know that their image has taken a hit.
Oh, yeah. The whole Gray situation.
Right. His relationship with Dean, those questionable decisions.
It definitely casts a shadow over the whole thing.
And they can't just ignore it.
Especially because this memo accidentally reveals some of those missteps.
Oops.
So what we see at the end of this memo is them trying to control the narrative.
Trying to spin it in a positive light.
Exactly. They're saying, hey, in the end, we were the ones who brought the truth to light.
It was our investigation that chipped away at the cover-up.
Right. And it's true that even with all the pressure and obstruction, the investigation did eventually lead to some accountability.
It's a reminder that the system can work.
Sometimes.
Even if it takes a while.
And they also make a point of saying, hey, look, we're not the bad guys here.
It was those White House folks.
Right. They're the ones who obstructed justice.
And they really hammer that point home.
They used Jaworski's conclusion.
The special prosecutor.
Yeah, that the high-level perjury was essential to the cover-up.
Mitchell and Ehrlichman lying through their teeth.
They're basically saying we were up against some of the most powerful people in the country.
And they were determined to keep the truth hidden.
No wonder it was such a difficult investigation.
Right. It's a pretty compelling argument.
It is.
Yeah.
But it still leaves us with some questions.
Of course.
What if the FBI had been more aggressive early on?
Right. What if Gray hadn't let Dean get so involved?
What if they had pushed for those search warrants?
So many what ifs.
And those are questions that historians are still debating today.
This memo just adds more fuel to that fire.
It's a really fascinating document.
Yeah, a unique perspective on a crazy time in our history.
It shows the FBI's internal struggles, their justifications, and ultimately their determination to find the truth.
Even if they made some mistakes along the way.
And it reminds us that Watergate was more than just a break-in.
It was a huge test of our democracy.
A battle between power and accountability.
And this memo gives us a glimpse into that struggle.
A valuable glimpse, even if it's a little biased.
Of course. But it makes you think about the role of law enforcement.
The importance of a free press.
And a vigilant public.
It's a story that still resonates today.
Absolutely.
And we encourage everyone to keep learning.
Keep questioning.
And never take our democracy for granted.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Watergate.
It's been a pleasure.